40.3% year-to-date compared to 47.15% last year. And then finally, going to the 10th page of the financial statement, fund year-to-date expenditures are 11.21 million, or 39.56% of the budget, compared to 10.74 million, or 41.55% expended by January of last year.
Mr. Ebden?
I wanted to back up to that last page about health claims payable. Under the Affordable Care Act fees, if my memory serves me right, I thought that was anticipated to be $227,000.
Well, what has happened with, and that's with Melissa Beck, she took a look at those Affordable Care Act fees, and we used a different method that lowered our fees by close to $60,000, given our families are made up of more than 2.35 members. So there's different ways to calculate that tax, and we chose obviously the least expensive. So our families are more than 2.35 members, and that lowered our tax by $60,000.
I thought that was, we discussed it, and I believe the term Lori used was per belly button.
That's correct.
That's correct.
So the fee is based on $5.25 per belly button per month covered by our plan. So that's about $63 per person on an annual basis. They have since provided clarification on how you can calculate that. And so rather than it be an actual count every single month, you can take your family plan coverage times 2.35. So our employees that carry the family plan, they allow you to assume a family coverage is 2.35 individuals. And then a single obviously is one. And so if you do the math, in our case, that saved us $60,000 by going that method. And being prudent, that's the route we chose. So it ended up costing us the $156,000.
And if I remember correctly, this amount that we're paying is going to be used to subsidize corporations who are insurance carriers.
In some way, shape, or form, it supports the exchange and providing affordable health care.
Right. Very unusual for us to be paying taxes to support corporations. Thank you.
The good news is $60,000 less. Okay. One can frame it, you're paying taxes to support corporations, or you can frame it, you're paying taxes to provide affordable health care coverage that some people don't get, which benefits corporations. There's no doubt about that. So.
And then, of course, as Joe mentioned, it's an annual cost to us. So we are covered till next year.
So, any other questions? I have one question. And this might have to do with the budget, but I guess it may even has to do with this present expenditures. Maybe Mr. Gray might even have to weigh in on this one. So, if we decide not to do the Smarter Balance test, or whatever we're going to call that test that's going to come out here, is that test this spring or is it next fall?
This spring.
So what happens if we choose not to do that test?
Well, I don't know if we can choose. We are talking with DPI what our options are at this point. We don't have a clear direction from them at this point, but we may not be able to, make that decision unilaterally. But we are looking at some options there.
So the cost of that test is borne by the district, or is it borne by DPI?
I believe it's DPI.
So they'll pay per student for that test?
I'm not sure of the, we're still trying to learn some, we're just getting some of the information in pieces here. And like I said, we are in conversation with them about the potential for waiving it next year, but we haven't heard anything. We don't have any direction from them.
Right, because it seems pretty clearly that because of a lot of different reasons, there's probably more than one, that we're having a test that might just be a one-year test.
That's correct, right.
And
Yeah.
isn't the test that was anticipated, and it's costing more.
Yes, it is,
So
right, right,
there's a lot of things against the test, per se, as
Right.
it's being implemented.
yeah.
So it seems like it's almost, if there's a way out of it, it seems like they're,
And there might be some technology requirements that we may or may not have. Again, these are all the things that we are reviewing at this point, and we have been in contact with DPI at, looking at different options.
so we don't know precisely whether, what would happen. What would we expect to happen if we just told DPI we're not gonna do the test?
They could provide sanctions, they could delay or withhold state aid. That would be hard to take. I'm hoping we can come to some kind of collaborative solution with them, though. That's our main goal.
So the pressure to do this test from us financially would be pressure that could be applied by DPI, not so much the federal government.
Yeah, it would all be DPI. I don't think that the feds have any say in the test at all, as far as I could tell. I have not seen anything other than DPI promoting the test.
So if we decided unilaterally not to take this test, it wouldn't necessarily affect this year's budget, but it would maybe have an impact on next year's budget.
It could, right, right.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for that. Now, let's move on to the last discussion item, which is the 2015-16 budget update.
Yes, we have now seen the governor's proposed budget. If you're ever interested in looking at a copy of the full thing, that's what this is. We certainly know that it will change as it goes through the process. The initial projection on our revenue side before you is based on the information provided in that budget. So the highlights, or lowlights, if you will, are that there's no increase in the per-member component of the revenue cap. So the funding level that we had last year is not increased. The base remains untouched. Last year, we saw a $75 increase in that amount. I believe it was 75 the year before that as well. So that's one of the changes. The most significant change financially is that there is a state aid that was created 3 years ago. We are in our third year receiving a per pupil aid. This last year, this current year that we are in, it's based on $150 per member on your 3-year rolling average, so just over $1.9 million. There is no funding in the 2015-16 year in the state budget. So roughly that's a $2 million hit. That's outside of the cap. So we have no other alternative funding source being proposed, so that is just wiped out. There is funding included in the second year of the biennium at $165 level. So it's here this year, it's gone next year, it comes back the year after, and is the way it's currently structured. So we will wait and see if that remains in that capacity, because that clearly is our biggest obstacle in the current funding method that we're looking at. So with those considerations, the total controllable revenue, and in the financial information we provided, we exclude all grants. So to try to give you an apples-to-apples comparison, these are controllable funds, if you will, within the district. We would be seeing a reduction of $2.7 million roughly from the same level of funding we have this year to next year. So our base drops by that amount. That's a 1.83% decrease in available revenues. That budget for next year excludes the rent that we currently receive for Pleasant Hill, so that's a $151,000 reduction. And then, as I mentioned, the per pupil aid is no longer included. So those two items are the bulk of what makes up that shortage. There has been conversation on what vouchers, the impact of the voucher legislation has on us. Currently, as written, vouchers reduce the equalization aid that's available to the district. Equalization aid is a component of the revenue cap, so as aid fluctuates, it's offset by property taxes. So if that aid comes down, the impact to our taxpayers is the tax goes up. It doesn't reduce the revenue limit in total. So right now, that it's a taxpayer burden is what we would see, the impact of expanding the vouchers. And there is limitations. They're only looking at people leaving public school to go to private school at the kindergarten, first grade, and ninth grade level that it would apply to. There's still question on, for instance, under open enrollment, when students choose to leave us and go elsewhere, we still count them as the resident. They go into the revenue cap calculation. A student who's in private school, we do not count. It is past practice. They aren't eligible to be counted because they're not enrolled with us. So I can't tell you with any certainty how the vouchers are going to work and whether the kids are in the base of the revenue cap or not. Okay, so, yes.
How would that count if students left our system to go to what's being proposed for La Casa, and that would be a voucher program with UW?
And I can't answer
That'd
that.
be a charter program. As I understand it, we wouldn't count the students, but La Casa would count it, and it would get funded by state monies.
So they would get the full 10,
No, I believe it's somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 per student.
that's quite a boon
There's
for
a,
them.
there's a charter amount out there that they would receive, a fixed amount, but I don't have that number exactly, but I believe it's somewhere in the $7,000 to $8,000 range.
Okay, and so currently they're considered a private school. So then any student that would transfer into that program, as I understand the budget proposal now, any student that would leave the district and go into, or any student that's in a private school now, the school would not receive state aid for those students, only for ones that would leave our program and go into a
Right, but
private
this
school.
is a charter, this is the voucher, this doesn't
Right.
follow the voucher. And technically, they don't have any students in those, the two grades that they want to establish. So it would be different than say, Catholic Memorial, which is a private school, and those students coming from our district to there would receive aid, but a student already in CMH would not receive anything. A charter school is different. The dollar amounts are different. It's treated more like a semi-public institution, except it's run independently. This one is supported, or I should say, sponsored by UW Milwaukee.
In Waukesha.
Yeah.
Don't we have a UW here?
We have a UW Waukesha, yeah, right. But UWM is one
Okay.
of the few post-secondary institutions that can have a charter.
Currently, they are a private school, though, aren't they? La Casa, don't they have?
Well, they have one of our 4K programs, but that won't happen next year. But technically, I don't know, I don't even know if they have any kind of formal education program that they would have in lieu of this charter school.
Okay. So this would be a real financial boon for their organization. All of a sudden,
It could be, right.
so they would, I would imagine, promote it quite heavily within the Hispanic community in
Right.
Waukesha.
That's what we promote ours.
Okay. All right.
Mr. McCaffrey?
Actually, UW Milwaukee gets the money, though.
I'm not sure that the
Because
process,
I don't think the La Casa gets it. I think UW Milwaukee is the administering entity, so they would actually get the money.
they may actually, but
from-
then they would
they would
then
dish it
fund,
out
right,
to,
yeah.
They would hire the staff.
But my guess is
Yes.
most of that would probably end up
probably
with
go.
La Casa.
right.
Right.
Mr. Adler?
Who provides, I mean, obviously, we have state licensed teachers who teach in K-12. What does the university offer in a voucher program like that?
I don't know that they're required to follow the same licensure procedures we are.
Wow.
I'm not aware. I know in some cases, charter schools can get waivers from particular licensed teachers. Voucher schools, there's no requirement for licensed teachers that I'm aware of.
Like, I'm having a trouble distinguishing between this particular proposal as a charter school and a private school, other than the paycheck. Who's paying for the bill? If we're taking away the licensing requirements, you've got a whole different scenario.
Right.
And again, I see very little difference between that and a private school.
I would say these new charter schools that are set up, you probably would not see a big difference.
Wow.
You're-
But yet, there's no cap, there's no income limits, there's nothing.
Well, there are certain limits in terms of where they can draw from. In other words, I believe they can only draw from a specific community. In other words, they couldn't open it up to everyone in Waukesha County. They would only be funded for students who live in this particular area. That's my understanding, and again, I think there's not many of these out there, so I think there's gonna be a little bit of trial and error as they move through this.
Okay, thank you.
My question on it is how do they fund this? I mean, it seems to me like, okay, it seems to me like there's extra funding going out the door for the taxpayer because you're funding the charter school through UW Milwaukee.
Right.
And then because we have this enrollment exemption on our cap, we don't get the state aid, but we still get the ability to tax our,
Not for charters, I believe the charters, if they don't enroll here, we don't get to count them.
well, but you have this unique situation where our cap number really doesn't go down. The total-
No, and the other issue is, where it impacts the state is that we would receive less funding, in equalization aid. It might be like $3,700, Lori, and they pay the charter schools, say, $7,500. So there's gotta be some additional state funding that's gonna be needed to fund these charter schools. And as well as some of the voucher programs.
While we're running deficits.
Good question.
Not that I don't want them to have their school and all that stuff, it's just kind of hard to understand the financials of it and how it impacts our taxpayers, because it seems to me, it's always nice to have someone have the opportunity to have choice, you know? And at the same time, we have financial constraints as a community and as a state, and it's really a complicated thing to understand how this all happens, and unfortunately, I don't think it's well explained by our legislators or by.
Well, no,
the
I
government.
think there's a lot of detail that isn't out yet that we're still trying to learn about. But first blush, I mean, there could be some pretty serious income or property tax ramifications. But again, this is simply the governor's proposal. We know that there's two legislative bodies that have to work through this, and it could change dramatically. But right now, the question is, how do you fund, basically three different types of school systems within the state?
And then the other point, just to get back to our discussion about that so-called unique situation, that's what was the past. It doesn't mean that's the future.
Right.
Because the legislation could eliminate that exemption, which could have a dramatic impact on our funds if we didn't have that exemption for decline in enrollment.
Right, that's correct.
But we wouldn't be the only ones that would be hurting from that.
No, there would be a lot, there would be, yeah.
Yeah. I heard a number from estimate based on just a pupil loss. The district of third our size they were estimating about $1 million was the cost to their budget. That would mean ours would be, if they allowed our revenue limit to decline, would be at least 3 million, right?
Oh, yeah, I mean, again, I think some of the numbers that Lori's looked at were probably a couple $1 million to the bad before any of these other things come to play, just based on what we've seen. And I don't know about these other districts. I don't know if they're including the rising costs as part of that deficit. I think our number is just based on loss of revenues from one year to the next. So I'd have to know more about the other district, but it doesn't surprise me. That number doesn't surprise me at all.
So has any of our legislators been in contact with you so far to ask about the impact, or
Not yet.
you expect them to contact you?
There will be some, yeah.
There'll be some.
And I've already preemptively contacted some as well to express some concerns.
Not that we're trying to change anything, but we just think they should know.
I'm trying to change some things. I don't know. Hopefully
trying-
there'll be some things changed.
Just trying to be nice about
Yeah.
it. So, more to present?
That's where we are today.
Okay. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which I believe has to do with the sale of district land, if I ever find my agenda for it.
You are correct.
Not that we're selling anything, but we might be selling anything.
So, we have gone through the process. As a district, own surplus property. We've had discussions earlier, might have been December, about our intentions on some of those properties. So I would like to proceed and actually put some of those properties up for sale and put them on the market. As part of that process, we would issue an RFP to solicit realtor brokers. But before I feel comfortable going to a broker and asking them to market our properties, I need your blessing on which properties we are willing to market. So attached, you'll find a listing of those current properties that would be eligible. The property on Merrill Hills Road, County TT, is not included here. That's a 100-acre parcel that is where the bypass would go through. Based on prior discussions, I think we have a long-term purpose. We still believe that's a viable option for future sites, so that has been removed from this list. So I'm asking for your input on, of these properties listed, which would you be comfortable marketing?
I think the best question, is there any on the list that you'd feel that we shouldn't market at all? Mr. Edlin?
Well, I'd like to start the conversation off on why you feel we should be selling some of these properties.
Because they've been identified as surplus, and by that nature, it means the district doesn't have a purpose for them.
Okay.
So, there's a cost associated with holding some of these. Pleasant Hill is coming back to us. It's no longer being rented effective July 1st. If that's a property that you're telling me you want to hang on to, then I'm guessing your direction would be to tell me to go out and look for another tenant, rather than leave it empty, because an empty building drives costs. There's costs associated that the utilities are coming back on board effective July 1, maintenance is ours, the security of it. Those are, all come into play.
Do we have an intention for the revenue of any properties that would be sold?
Do we have it, if we sell it, what, would we use those? You can direct that. I do not have any explicit sources that we would
Intended.
apply that to.
Nothing intended. So if we sold the money, it's just,
We have a land fund, And all of those, the money in there has come from the sale of other properties.
Okay.
So unless the board were to designate otherwise, that would be the natural spot for it to go.
Okay. My big concern is here right now that we're gonna be considering selling properties in a down market. And I can understand if some of these facilities are sitting vacant and costing us money, there is a cost associated with that. But again, like Pleasant Hill, I'm not necessarily in favor of selling that property at this point because it's an undeveloped area. And I feel that within a few years, we might want to reconsider that, unless we had a specific need, unless we had a specific identified capital improvement project within the district that we would want to plow that money into right away, and I could see the financial benefit of raising capital for that. I'm not necessarily in favor of selling a highly valued property in a down market. So I'll let the other committee members speak for that, but I think that it's possible to maybe get another tenant into Pleasant Hill until that area does get developed just a little bit. We all know that there's a lot of high-end properties proposed for that area, but that's been talk for quite a few years now, and we haven't seen anything come of it yet, and I'd like to see something move before we make a decision. It's not going, I think real estate market's pretty much low right now, so I don't think that we'd actually lose money on the property if we hung on to it.
Well, I can tell you that's the one property I regularly get calls from realtors about.
I'm sure. Like I
know,
said, it's a down
inquiries,
market,
you
they
know,
know.
They have potential tenants, or, customers out there who are interested in that.
Yeah, and
that
that's why I'm
lot,
not
so.
real comfortable wanting to put that one on the market right now, just because I think as people see that area develop, these developers know that property will only gain in value and not lose in value. So I think we'd be selling ourselves short to sell it now in a down market, in an undeveloped, high-potential area.
Mr. Como?
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Looking at the Regal property, wondering if we should lump that in with the property across the street. Not sure what we need for possible water and sewage. Could this be strategic in that with bypass going in? Don't know the question to that, but it may become valuable to us. Maybe we do a little bit of studying and we find out it really doesn't matter if we get rid of that acre and the property on it. But I would hate to sell that property and have us not really be situated to be able to properly bring water to the property to the west. So that's a consideration. With respect to Pleasant Hill, I hear what you're saying, Steve, in terms of a down market, but we don't necessarily have to accept any offer that comes by. So personally, I think I'd be really interested to see what some of those offers could maybe be. But we don't have to accept something that we believe is too low. Just a thought.
Mr. McCaffrey?
I would agree with Joe that we don't have to accept any offers, is why I'd put everything on the market. See what we drum up. I'd love to get rid of the place on 164 that we got nailed on a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, I'd put everything on the market. We can always say no, to see what's out there.
Well, one of the, just keep in mind, when a realtor lists a property, they have to put a value on it, a for-sale price. So that's part of the RFP. We would ask them to do a valuation of all of our properties.
Right.
And so at that point, I would bring it back.
Right.
Right,
Right.
and
Yep.
get your approval based on the recommendations, would we or wouldn't we?
Mr. Edlin?
I also have concerns about Harvey Phillip and the old environmental ed building. The environmental ed building is kind of landlocked between the services building and Harvey Phillips. But, you know, the administration hasn't brought forward a long-term plan yet, and we all know the bottleneck that we have in STEM at the junior high school level, and there was talk at one time about possibly remodeling Harvey Phillip, and that hasn't been discussed for a while. I know that we lost one family that wanted to transfer into our district to be able to go to Saratoga from out of our district because of the STEM program. So I think that's our strength in our district right now. One of our strengths is that, you know, the STEM program has a great recognition not only within our community, but now outside of our community. And because we haven't addressed this bottleneck or discussed Harvey Phillip expansion of Saratoga into the Harvey Phillip building or whatever we're gonna do with the program, because we don't have a long-term plan, we're losing a potential transfer in student from another district. And if, you know, consideration is still being given to Harvey Phillip, one way or another, we just haven't gone there.
Well, we have been looking at some different options there. Personally, I think knocking it down and starting over was what we would look at. We know that, you know, with the Hawthorne program growing, we're gonna need more space, because we don't wanna have those kids starting that program. And so there would be some need for some capital dollars that we could gain from the sale of some of these surplus properties, and it would go into the Harvey Phillips rebuild or whatever we would do to that particular building. I believe the architect said it would be probably cheaper to knock it down and start over. It's in that
We actually did a cost comparison to remodel Harvey Phillips versus putting an addition on Saratoga. And the recommendation clearly was the addition to Saratoga for a whole slew of reasons. But bringing the building up to code, just for instance, a major remodel would require everything being brought up to code. And
There was a problem with that, though, in the fact that, I mean, now I'm getting off topic, and I really do wish we'd had these types of conversations probably a year ago, because we're way overdue on them. But now I'm hearing two different things. One is sell the property, that's what's being proposed here, and the other is tear the building down. But then again, I've heard that we've got issues and we can't tear it down because we accepted some federal money and had the building declared a historical building.
I believe
Not
that
the
was the
Harvey
science
Phillips.
building, not the Harvey Phillips.
right,
That's the one next door.
The environmental ed.
And I think we'd have
The boarded up
a
building.
tough time selling that, even if, well, I mean, just based on the condition of the building. But the Harvey Phillips, it's not on the register, it could be raised and rebuilt. And I would like to, you know, I think we're kind of waiting to see where budget's going, but if we had capital dollars that didn't impact our operating budget next year, I think it would make a lot of sense to take a look at that, if we could rebuild that and then solidify Saratoga as our
Right.
STEM middle school.
Now you're talking, now you've brought this conversation full circle.
Okay.
I would be in favor of selling Pleasant Hill if the money were dedicated towards tearing down Harvey Phillips and expanding that campus. See, I'm just not seeing a, you know, that's where this
Well,
whole
I mean,
Well, you
long-
aren't gonna get any argument from us.
Right,
in-
well,
Yeah.
I'm just saying
Yeah.
that this goes back to our long-term planning that we should have heard a year ago. And I'd sure like to, you know, I have no problem with that at all, as long as we got a purpose. If we sell these properties, I want to see a reason to sell the properties. I don't want to just sell them just because we've got them sitting there, because we're not identifying a need for the capital. And I'm not in favor of selling capital assets just for the sake of selling capital assets. The assets are not going down in value. You know, that's just my
Yeah. And
investing
we do have
philosophy.
some funds in that property fund already, which we could, you know, dedicate to the rebuild. And then, let's say that the 164 property is the best deal we could sell at. That may cover the kind of addition we need without having to sell Pleasant Hill. So I think we need to get some values on those, sale values on those. And then, yes, I would definitely agree with you, dedicate those towards that particular rebuild, because we're not going to have anything in the way of operating budget funds to put towards that rebuild. It'll have to come from a
Right.
capital program.
I mean, we've identified the student need, and that's the priority. The
Yeah.
student need is what's driving
Right,
the
right,
financial
yeah.
decisions, but we haven't
Yeah.
done anything. And I understand what's being proposed here, but again, I don't agree with it unless I identify the need
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
within the district, and that is the need, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think if we can go out and get some pricing, bring it back next month, and then look at that, the potential for which properties we would dedicate towards rebuilding that, then we can begin our planning, or planning in earnest, I should say,
Okay.
to expand Saratoga.
That I'd support.
And we do have an extensive facility plan in the works. I mean, it hasn't gone away. The one component it's missing is the long-range plan for enrollment numbers, and that's in where we are right now, trying to take that next step. We've identified our facilities, we've done a study on the infrastructure, the potential for growth within a building, how to accommodate curricular programs, but the one piece we don't have is the demographics. And I think we need the big picture so we can kind of look long-term, rather than just solve for today. Let's look and solve long-term. So that's coming.
Well, heard some comments, and there's some things I guess I'd like to clarify a little bit. If we were to sell the Regal property, we could certainly put a rider in the contract that would address concerns that we might have.
The easement, we'll put an easement in the
Yeah,
contract.
so that would be, I think, anytime we have a property that has a house on it, we're better off marketing it and selling it than holding on to it and letting the house get into
We know it
disrepair.
deteriorates,
Yeah.
any property deteriorates when
Yeah.
it's not occupied.
And, it's not a bad piece of property, and it's probably a great starter home or a fixer-upper home for somebody. And should the bypass go through, which we can always think that the bypass might go through, but so far, as a developer once told me, never count on a bypass. I've been hearing that talk for 50 years, and it's probably going to be 50 more years before it finally happens. So I think we should go ahead and market that property. I'd put that as a first priority property, actually, with the necessary easements. And just kind of prioritizing where we should be going. Obviously, the 164 property, we had that sold at one time, and we had a hostile town of Waukesha at the time. We no longer have a hostile town of Waukesha. In fact, even the person who almost bought that land is the town chairman now. And he's saying he was glad he didn't buy it because he would have taken a bath on it. So if we had been able to sell it back then, that would have been money in our pocket, and that was much better than what we can get for it today.
And back on the tax rolls.
And back on the tax rolls. And so, unfortunately, it's not always the case that that property always goes up. It does go down. If you find somebody who has a legitimate expectation for a need for a property, they'll pay probably a premium price for that property. But I wouldn't expect 164 property to be easy to sell at all, but because we used to have it on the market forever and very few bites, but we should put it up there anyway.
I've heard, yeah.
So that's what we call
The Larson Farm.
the Larson Farm, yeah. All those acres out there that we really don't need. Regarding the Adams Gegex property, we really haven't been planning for, we have the land out in TT, and we really haven't been planning to use the Adams Gegex property. It really is a surplus property from a planning point of view, unless we decide to build some major school up there. When we have the land out in TT, it doesn't really make sense. So to me, it's not really hard to fathom that as a property we should be marketing and selling. If it's the same situation there, though, as I'd say with Pleasant Hill. Unless we get a really good price, why would we sell it? Okay.
You'll notice on the aerial map, the checked off black area is the area we sold to the city for the parkland that hasn't been updated on the county's website, so that's my scribble, sorry. Didn't come out pretty.
I think we should put the environmental ed building up for sale. We won't get any buyers, then we can tear it down. I think that's the historical, we need to tear that building down. a few years back, I believe it was the Hillsmans. Well, I shouldn't say that. I can't say it was them or who it was, because I really don't remember. But that strip out there that's in front of environmental ed, because of its location, is great for a multifamily or condo-type development. That was proposed to us once before, and the environmental ed building is kind of in the way. That could be used for parking, a number of things. So it would be better to have that building torn down. There's no reason to keep it. But to tear it down, we're going to have to market it. And then once we can't sell it, I believe it's just like the little gas station by the Y. If you can't sell it, it can go.
Would you be interested then in marketing that parcel separately or with that property?
We should market the parcels separately, and market the property separately, because,
Right.
they are separate entities.
Because I can see where that, the building actually sits. It's in line with our service building, and I don't know that we'd want to sell just a jog out of there, but I can see listing it separately.
Yeah, just separately so we can tear it down,
Gotcha.
The goal here is to tear that building down,
So minimal acreage to go with it.
right? And then we can decide how we use that area relative to that building being torn down. We don't have any use for that building at all, to speak
It's
of.
currently boarded up.
To me, it's a safety hazard, and
The
unless
water's
we
shut
can
off
get
to
someone to
it.
pick
There's
it
no
up as a
heat.
historical property, there's all sorts of historical properties around this town that need attention. And Harvey Phillips, not really a building that's saleable. It's a property that will probably be either repurposed or deconstructed. So I'm not sure that we can really put Harvey Phillip on the market as a saleable building. There's really no
Currently
need
has
to.
a tunnel connected to Saratoga.
Yeah. So I don't really see that as being one that we can put on the list. Regarding Pleasant Hill, I think I agree with Mr. Como and Mr. McCaffrey. We just have to be careful on these, and the realtors come in, they're bringing in a price that's intended to be able to sell the property. We want a price that's quite a bit above market value, and we should note that to the realtor. We see that, in particular, the Adam Giglio's property and the Pleasant Hill property as being two high market value properties based on their location and things like that. So we're not anxious to sell them unless we get a very good price. Is that more or less in line with the
Exactly
committee?
what I was thinking.
Right. I know, I have no desire to dedicate any funds prior to selling. That's a whole different discussion for me. I think when we talk about STEM, maybe we should be talking about the total program and how better to serve the total program. We have an engineering academy at South. Why can't we have a STEM academy at Central or at one of our middle schools? Normally what we do in this district is we figure out how to use existing resources before we spend capital on building new resources. And that's been our history over the years, and I think it should continue to be our history. Save that capital for maintaining our buildings and things like that as much as we can. But if there's a need to expand STEM at Saratoga, so be it. Mr. Edlin?
Thank you. There actually is a need to expand STEM at Saratoga because we've got a waiting list, and now we have 2 elementary schools which feed into one elementary school. It's not physically big enough to be a junior high school, and that's, how we started out with that program. So the need is there. We've identified that a number of years ago. And I think that's a strength, again, of the district, and quite frankly, we should build on our strengths. The reason we can't really expand it into our other 2 junior high schools is lack of capacity. We already know that Butler, we're busting at the seams. We don't have any room to put anything at Butler. And that was one of the reasons we started STEM at Saratoga, which was going to be closed, was to help relieve some of the pressure from our other schools. And so we have a place to expand it, and we still have, problems with enrollment, high enrollment in our other junior high schools. So this is an opportunity for us to develop that campus area into actually a fourth junior high school campus. I'm, again, without a long-term plan, I think we'd be shooting ourselves in the foot by selling the land that's in front of the old environmental ed building. If we want to develop a full campus in that area that's going to be geared up towards STEM, we want to look first at the potential for that land that we have there right now. If we want to tear down Harvey Phillip, we can, but we may shoot ourselves in the foot in saying, gee, I wish we would have put a football field right there for the kids to play junior, I don't know what you call it, junior North Stars or whatever the program would be. And unfortunately, in that neighborhood, they're not making any more land, as Mark Twain would say. So I'm not in favor of putting the environmental ed building up for sale. I mean, if we do and nobody buys it, we can tear it down, that's an asset. But to sell the land around it without any long-term plan, without any discussion by this committee, is short-sighted.
We've already discussed this with an architect, and they said that it would be easier to put an addition on. Can't we even look at that so we had some kind of an idea? Because I think that's,
In addition onto Saratoga?
well, look at the plan.
Right.
Where did he locate it? How did it, it gives us a little bit of insight on what to do with that big hunk of land down there.
Right. I think that's a very good point. And one of the problems I have with the discussion is the need is apparently to expand STEM. What we're talking about is a solution that could be one of many solutions. And the solution itself isn't really fleshed out, as you say, without an architectural plan saying, here's what it would take for us to expand Saratoga to however many seats that we're thinking about expanding to. But with declining enrollment, what does that mean for our other middle schools? Are we going to end up with empty space there as we build space? So we really have to balance the solution for a demand.
We do have a lot of space needs at both Horning and Butler. So if it shifted some kids to, that would be actually good for us. That would be a good thing. I guess what I'd like to do is take a look at the plan. I'm assuming that the architects would recommend knocking down Harvey Phillips and rebuilding in that particular location. And then I'd also want to know what they think about that other vacant land, because they may, typically they may say, you're gonna need some green space for activities that our other schools currently have. So I think before we would put that football field on the market, I too would like to see the plan. I think that's what both Mr. Edlin and Ms. Madden are trying to suggest. Let's look at the plan first before we make any further commitments on that particular piece.
Well, I think one of the problems I have is we did have quite a bit of work done on marketing that property in the past.
It could be, right?
So we should pull out that dusty file
Okay.
and see what that involved, because I think that did have plans and drawings for how we'd break up that property.
Yes, I have seen some turning that, what's now the football field, into individual home sites. That's the plan I've seen. Now, again, I don't know how old that was, but
And there's lots of green space around Saratoga. There's a park next to Saratoga. I mean, it's not like, that's why we need, I agree with Ms. Madden, if we have an overall study, we may find that that land should be sold.
right,
Or we may find we should keep it.
keep it.
Okay? But for us to get rid of the old environmental ed building, to me, that's a no-brainer. Put it on the market so we can tear it down. As a new-
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can choose whether we sell it or not, if it's in
Right.
our price, so.
Right.
price.
We get a good price. I mean, the rule is, if you get a market price,
Yep.
then it's a historical building, you have to sell it. But the reality is, no one's gonna buy that building. So, and it's not, we're not really preserving that building, so it doesn't seem to make sense to keep it. Mr. Edlin?
If we market that building, do we have to provide an easement?
We have to provide access. It has to have an access road to
Yeah.
it.
Come out.
But you could do that from, I believe that Well, I guess I guess we'd have to see the plan. There are a couple different ways it could be potentially, but, I think ultimately that building will probably be raised, because I just can't imagine someone wanting to put the work into that needs to be done.
If we don't market it, we can't tear it down. So
Right.
that's the rule. So from my perspective, I guess I would be okay of holding off on the strip of land. It wasn't even on this list, okay?
No, I just
But we
packaged it in.
need a solution to, if we have a problem with STEM, we need a solution, and we need to look at what those solutions are with, in mind of what our projected enrollment is going forward. I heard comments about, I think, for example, K through 8, if we're looking at what La Crosse is trying to accomplish with their charter schools, they're talking about in 5 years, they'll have up to 244 kids, and those will all be pulled from the school district of Waukesha. So that's quite an impact on our enrollment and our cost structure. The fewer kids we have, the less money we have to maintain buildings. We don't need to build more of them without taking some of them out of commission. So. Mr. Edlin?
That's well put. You know, I don't want to get into the debate of what we're currently offering versus what La Crosse, because it's a philosophical debate. However, I think, again, if we're going to market this district, and what I'm seeing right now is other districts interested, or other parents from outside of our district wanting to send their kids here for a specific program that we have, we're doing something right somewhere, and we should build on that. I think what we found out, and Todd, you could probably share this better than I could, because I wasn't there to hear it, but, you know, one of the things that I asked Todd to do early on was to talk to area presidents of manufacturing companies and say, what do you need? What do you need from us? And they identified exactly the STEM type of environment that we're offering now. And, you know, Waukesha County is very fortunate in that, you know, we've got a very diversified economic base here, and the economic base in the city of Waukesha is industrial, a lot of it, and that's expanding over into new high-tech industrial jobs. But the classes that are required for those, or the fundamental education components for an employee, are STEM-based. And I think that the district has a real gem in being able to attract other students or families from outside of the district specifically for those programs. So, you know, I see even a future shortage in not only the junior high school area, and we've always had this concern, when children leave STEM at Saratoga, they're not going to be in that same type of collaborative learning environment when they get to high school. And, you know, we're hoping to get some feedback on that. I don't know if we've gone in that direction yet, but we're going to be looking at what are we going to do. What's going to be the next step? I'm not suggesting we build a new high school, but, you know, obviously we're going to have a bottleneck in that area. That's our next bottleneck, our next challenge. So I guess I'm saying we should be building and focusing on the programs that are working really well for us, that would attract people to the district, that would attract people from outside of the district to the district, and not worry about outside forces that we can't control.
Right, and again, that has been our planning, and, you know, we'd like to start that phase with something at Saratoga, whether it's a remodel or a rebuild. It'd make a lot of sense.
Mr. Gray, just a quick question. I mean, the people that come in from outside the district on open enrollment versus the people that you lose to a charter school, the dollars don't offset, do they?
Not quite, no.
Not quite.
No.
It's more than not quite, it's like 30%, a 30% loss?
It's about a 25% difference.
Yeah.
7,500 versus, but on the other hand, our costs are such that we would still benefit by having open enroll students coming into the district.
But we'd probably be more beneficial if we did what we could to try and make sure we provide the type of academic environment that would attract our own people who live in our community.
We're absolutely doing that, and I'll have some information that I can share Wednesday night on that as well, to make sure we're doing whatever we can to maintain students in the district.
because I guess it's no secret, last time I was on the board, I wasn't a big fan of closing White Rock. And one of the reasons I didn't want to close White Rock is because I believe community schools are very important. And now, you know, we have a community school being opened up that will potentially pull resources away from the district. Whether that's going to be something we can fix or not, I don't know, but the bottom line is that we have to figure out how to better compete.
Actually, a lot of those students that were at White Rock were living in the Blair community, and we've repositioned Blair as that community school.
Right.
And then some Banting as well. So I think we've covered that particular area, and we'll continue to hopefully expand those programs so people will want to stay here. And we're not going to go down without a fight.
And that's all fair. I mean, I don't think anyone who starts up a school in this area should expect us to just say, well, we aren't good enough to hold on to our kids.
Right.
We should be
Right.
able, Waukesha is a pretty special place, and we think highly of our diversity, and,
Yeah.
but we also don't fault somebody for starting up a charter school. So.
Right.
Okay, so, tasks are pretty much, other than the Harvey Phillip building, which certainly we can't really sell, I think everything else is marketable. Some not as marketable as others in terms of the pricing we want to set. And before we talk about the land that's in front of we need an architectural plan or a solution plan for what we do with STEM.
And we can have that very soon, because
Okay.
we have been working on it.
And that solution, to me, should take into account what our projections are for overall district enrollment based on past trends. We seem to continue to decline. And what happens if they ever drop the enrollment exemption, you know, the cap exemption? How much do we have to adjust our entire cost structure if that ever happens? So, we don't have the rolling average anymore? Three-year, it's still the three-year rolling average type thing? It's not as, but you said it's not lower than the year before, so,
This,
There's a
For 1 year.
declining enrollment exemption that cushions us. So it looks at the 3-year rolling average from last year versus the new year, and takes that difference, if it's a drop, and adds that back times what our base amount per pupil was, and adds it back to the formula for that year. So it's kind of a hold harmless. It protects us for that year from dropping rapidly. And then the next year it's out of the base, and then you do the measurement again.
so the next year it's out of the base, so we get 1 year.
So it gives you a 1-year grace period, so it brings it down slower to give us more time to react. Because you can randomly pull students out of the district, you know, across grade levels, and you probably do not see a reduction in staffing because we're such a large district and they're spread all over the place. So our costs do not reduce accordingly. And so it allows us that time to make those adjustments.
Okay. So what that difference then from the past, I guess, is it gives us a year to reduce our costs relative to our enrollment decline year to year. So it gives us a 1
Fair
year.
warning, it's
Gives us a
coming.
1 year lag, which is good. That's helpful.
That's been in place a long time, though, right?
It's been part of the formula since the revenue cap was created. We've taken advantage of it over the last few years.
Okay. Any other questions on the district property? Comments? Lots of good comments, lots of good discussion. I think it was worthwhile to expand discussion a little bit, and with Steve's comments on STEM and things like that was quite good, so I appreciate that. With nothing else, I think that's the end of our meeting. We'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.